Is this thing on?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Lewis Harris, and I'm the creator of Record in Progress, the podcast I created in the wake of the 2024 presidential election because I felt like I could have done more to see it go in the direction I wanted to see it go in. And I say that with a little bit of a caveat that aware that a lot of people voted different ways and with different perspectives and opinions. And I'm just trying to create a platform for those diverse and different perspectives and opinions to create a shared understanding about society and hopefully create a pathway forward for society to be better for all of us. I am really privileged and glad to have my next guest with me, who was somebody that actually commented on one of the posts of this podcast on YouTube. And so, what is your name, sir?
My name is Rick,
And how do you identify yourself?
just as a male, white
Okay.
white male. Yeah.
And so, Rick, what state and city do you live in?
I live in the Midwest. I'll just say I'm in Nebraska.
You're my first guest from Nebraska, Rick, so I appreciate you for being on. And just for disclosure, the reason we ask some of these questions that might seem really personal is because we try in this podcast to create some mutual understanding about different people. And a lot of times people understand a person based on the work they do or where they live or how they identify themselves. So that's why those questions exist. The next question is what do you do professionally?
I'm a graphic artist. Basically, I do simple design work for a company that produces containers.
Okay, excellent. So graphic designer, awesome. Does that mean you have skills with like video or you're all digital?
Oh, I'm not that smart. No, I don't do 3D. I don't do animation, all 2D, some process work, but mainly I do pre-press stuff for printing presses.
Excellent. And the next question I have is what is a credential that you use most often to sell yourself on job applications?
Just conscientious. Usually it's just just that I'm very meticulous about things.
Okay, I think that's a great trait to have. Way to market yourself. All right, well, let's get into the meat of the questions, Rick. So the first one is how did you vote in the 2024 presidential election?
I voted for Trump, and as far as all the down ballot stuff, mostly Republican. There were some. Don Bacon was one person I didn't vote for. I didn't vote for either candidate. I didn't vote for Don Bacon. I didn't vote for Deb Fisher. I just left those blank.
Which positions were those? You could
Those were
enlighten.
Senate. Those were for Senate.
Okay, so just to clarify, you voted for Trump and you voted mostly Republican down ballot, but you stayed out of that Senate race.
Yes,
I'm curious why.
because they were people that have typically voted. They were, I would consider rhinos. They
Gotcha.
would say that they're conservative or libertarian, but then on a lot of bills, they would. One thing I really didn't like is I believe Deb Fisher voted for the Inflation Reduction Act, which was highly controversial. So, and that's one thing and plus in 2010, she campaigned as a Tea Partier and took over Ben Nelson's seat. Remember, Ben Nelson was the person that basically got Obamacare in there. And so that was the reason that she got voted in. And she promised that she would only serve 2 terms and then term limit herself, but she has not kept that promise.
I see. That is an unfortunate recurring narrative that I've heard when it comes to our Congress members. So it's interesting. So you sound very principled and that your principles kind of align with how you vote. Is that accurate to say that?
Yeah, I'm pretty strict as far as I'm more libertarian than I am conservative. If somebody asks me my party affiliation, I say I'm conservative libertarian or libertarian conservative, but my voting goes for the least amount of government.
Okay.
I'm all for as little government as possible.
And just for viewers who aren't familiar with what libertarian believe in, they and you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, but they believe small government or little government as possible, and believe that individuals have the wherewithal to be able to manage the issues that government tries to manage. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
That's pretty accurate. But one thing that I will often disagree with people on, I think most people believe that libertarians are somewhere in between conservatives and liberals, and that's not true. What libertarians are actually to the right of conservatives
Oh,
because they believe in less government than conservatives. Conservatives believe in some government and more government in certain situations than libertarians believe in. I would say libertarians are just to the left of anarchists.
we're prepared for any type of person on the podcast, right? And so no judgments are being made, at least on my part. Listeners, I can't speak for their judgments, but in terms of the podcast, everybody's welcome and all voices have this and matter here. So thank you for enlightening us about libertarianism. That is a perspective that I know is out there. So the next question I have for you is, what are the three feelings you have about the results of the 2024 presidential election?
Would say happy would be one. I don't know if it's really a feeling, but it just reserved because I know that in 2016 that most of what Trump is probably going to try and do and what he actually gets to do are not even going to be close. I
Sure.
believe that there's enough rhinos and that it's close enough in the House that a lot of the bills that he tries to get through are just not going to go through. So I'm pretty grounded in knowing that it's not going to go the way a lot of MAGA people believe it's going to.
Interesting. Reserved. And was there a third one?
No, not really. I'm pretty just even tempered on stuff. And I just know that it's not going to be as bad. It's not going to be as bad as a lot of liberals think it's going to be. And it's not going to be as great as a lot of MAGA people think it's going to be. It's going to be somewhere in between. I think it's going to be a lot like 26. I believe that what we saw, I can't remember his name, was Johnson. He's the House
Mike Johnson.
Majority Leader. Yes.
Yes.
I think he's shown that he's definitely a rhino and he's going to be like Paul Ryan was in 2016. I think he's going to block a lot of stuff that Trump tries to get through. So I'm pretty even tempered on what's going to happen. So I wasn't going to get super excited about the win because I know it's not going to be, there aren't going to be drastic changes like a lot of people think.
So with that, the next question, in terms of the questions, what you fear most is first, and then what you hope most is second. So what do you fear most about the next Trump presidency?
That he won't get the spending bills in that he wants, that I believe he really wants to bring down the deficit, but I don't think that's going to happen. I guess the other thing is I keep hearing about the wall. Well, I keep hearing about deportations, but I'm like, well, deportations aren't going to help very much when you don't have a wall up. So even if you do send people back, they're just going to come right back over. They keep talking about deportations, but what about the wall? You have the wall built. So I think the wall is probably one of the bigger things that I'm concerned about.
I hear you there. So the next question then is, what do you hope most about the next Trump presidency?
That he will actually get his deportations done and get his corporate taxes implemented like he wants to and lower personal taxes also.
I empathize with some of that. I'm certainly hoping that the personal taxes go down, but there's just such a mixed bag about the state of the country right now. So there's a lot of things that, at least in my opinion, there's a lot of things that he's offering and indicating that he's going to do that to some might seem very bad. Some is actually beneficial in the long time coming. And I even say that knowing that some of the things he wants to do, progressive Democrat people also want to happen. So it's just one of those things where it's like there's a lot of fear and a lot of hope out there, but what will happen is, like you mentioned, we just don't know.
I'd like to ask you, I'm assuming you probably aren't for lowering corporate taxes.
No, instead of like a surefire no, let me tell you what I believe. What I believe is that individuals are being taken advantage by the system, whether the system is the economic system of corporate self-governance or the government and its unequal and unfair practices to everybody, right? I'm a individual person, which means that I will always think that whatever benefits the individual or the everyday person is going to be best. And a lot of times that doesn't align with corporate taxation.
I understand where you're coming from, but don't you believe that, if corporations are allowed to flourish more, that it will trickle down to the little guy. He will earn more and spend more, and it will stimulate the economy more.
Yeah, in
The,
principle that's true, but I mean there hasn't been
isn't that
consistent.
what capitalism is built on, though? I mean, isn't that how we've gotten to be the most prosperous nation in
Sure.
the
Yeah,
world?
but capitalism as a concept or as a economic model versus how it's currently being implemented is completely different, right? Because I mean, there are companies who have taken advantage of workers and are looking for opportunities to cut costs to produce goods that could also be harmful to individuals. I believe that workers and individuals and consumers should have the power to regulate corporations and not the other way around.
Okay.
But that's just me. And again, I'm my background, just for you, Rick, my background's in psychology and sociology. I'm a humanistic person. I care about people. I care about individuals. I even care about the individuals who are manning these corporations. But I don't believe that individual people is the same thing as a corporation. And I don't believe that corporations have the best interests for individual people, whether it's their workers or their consumers. I just believe that they're looking to make a dollar. And so,
Well, certainly. I mean, that's what capitalism is built off of
right.
is trying to make a profit. But the counterbalance to that, and it's not a perfect counterbalance, is that if you're not treating those workers correctly and or making a substandard product because you're cutting corners, then people won't buy your product and people won't work for you, and they'll go to the next guy who is treating his workers better and making a better product. And I my thought is always that the best, I would rather trust a private individual or a corporation than I would a bureaucracy or government. I believe you have more bad actors in government than you do in private corporations. Certainly, you have some bad actors in private corporations, and we've proven that that happens in capitalism. But overall, I think you are better off. Well, I totally believe it because you see all the countries that have instituted communism or have been Marxist in some way and been taken over and are state centered, that they end up being a lot worse off overall for the people, the little guy in the long run.
I appreciate you for asking the question and kind of turning it back on me. Yeah, I really do appreciate that. I'm curious, just to kind of continue the conversation. When you say bad actors, what does that really mean?
People,
It means, yeah,
well,
individuals that
yeah,
might not have the best interest of other people, right?
yeah. I don't know if you've ever seen the Donahue segment where Milton Friedman talks to Donahue about communism versus capitalism,
I haven't
but
seen it.
I might have to send it to you. But
Okay.
basically, he tells Donahue, he said, "You're probably not old enough to remember Donahue, do you?"
Phil Donahue?
Phil Donahue, yeah.
Yes, I remember.
Oh, okay. But he tells him, he says, where are you going to get these angels in government that are going to form this utopia that you want in communism? He says, I don't trust anybody in the government, not even you. I mean, so where are we going to get these people that are supposedly going to create this utopia that communism and socialism always purports? So I would much rather trust my fellow man out in the private sector than I would a government that can hide behind layers and layers of bureaucracy and not have to worry as much about legal ramifications if they do something bad. And so I've always seen a lot more bad people in government than I have out in the public
Ye-
sector.
So I actually really love the fact that you gave that example because that's a good question, right? Where are the individuals that are going to be in this utopia government? Where are they going to come from, right? So that's where I absolutely agree because I'm a firm believer that society has eroded individual free will, has eroded individual decency, and has eroded individuals' ability to critically think and or prioritize things that benefit them rather than the company they work for or the community that they're a part of. So I actually agree with you on that point. But my approach is to educate and create all of the benefits for individuals to do better for themselves so that they can also be better for society, instead of believing that the systems that govern individuals are beneficial. You hear what I'm saying?
So how would you what do you think is the best way to go about that?
Excellent question. I think education, and when I say education, the standard education system is probably not the best example. I want people to have information about themselves and the world and how those things work in a way that they can make informed decisions. I don't believe that even as humanity, as humans, or even as a nation, we're given all of the information we need to make good choices for ourselves. It's left to individuals to find that information, which some do and some don't. And I think that that's where the education system as a whole could benefit from change, is that we should prioritize things that empower individuals to make choices rather than just focus on test scores and getting people out of education so that the next group of people can come in.
I agree, but this is where I would say it doesn't make any sense that you vote Democrat or to the left, where they actually stifle that by saying we're not going to allow public school or private school vouchers. We're going to keep giving more and more money to public schools that basically are less free will and less education.
Sure.
So I don't understand why you would want to vote for Democrats when they're more about
I,
education control.
I got you, Rick. The reason why I vote Democrat is because the system doesn't allow me to vote otherwise. And I say that because despite the third party candidates that are out there, despite whatever alternative approach to politics an individual can take, the current system of politics is very binary. It's Republican and Democrat, right?
Hmm.
And to believe that my individual voice is going to change that system without me changing the system, that's, to me, that's a waste of time. And so why I vote Democrat is because I believe democratic values as a party aligns more with what I want to see the world be, rather than any other kind of iteration or political party. And I only say that because I am a firm believer that both Democrats and Republicans are two sides of the same coin. And for our United States to be the healthiest and to be the powerful, we have to figure out a way to balance those things instead of being opposed to those things, which creates the division and the, everyday person separation that we.
I see, but you say you want to change the system, but the Democrats are the system. They are the establishment. They are the state. They are the
I would
ones
say
that
the system is the corporate interests because, and I don't want to be overgeneral, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, Rick, but my point is that I'm not looking at the world in terms of this is black and white. I'm looking at the world in terms of this is portrayed to me as black and white, but the reality is that there's a lot of gray. And so I'm operating from a sense of, okay, I will operate in the black and white where it's appropriate, but I know that the gray is where everything really exists. You hear what I'm saying?
not really, because if you believe that the corporations and the corporate system is at fault and not the government, or that they're more at fault, is what I'm
I
hearing
think
you say.
people in government and the corporate system are at fault.
Okay, but I don't see that they're nearly as bad as the government. The government, I can change corporation by not going and shopping for them, and other people can stop that corporation from instituting more bad things if they just stop shopping there. Whereas the government, once they've got tax money, you can't do anything. They've got you. And
Sure.
so I see that I have a lot more control over corporations and what they do and how they are rather than the government.
Well, I mean, but you as an individual, I mean, taking the individual perspective, do you believe that you have as much power to change corporate behavior as you do government behavior as an individual, right? Because conceptually, you're right. If we have a whole group of people with enough unity to make decisions together, and that group of people chooses not to shop somewhere, yeah, that will make some significant impacts to the shop, and that shop will have to figure out either how to get those customers back or how to do something else, right? But that's only if you
Yeah.
have a big group of people, right? From an individual perspective, do you still believe that?
Well, certainly. And corporations aren't largely affecting my everyday to day life like the government does.
Ah,
If I don't like Walmart because they've got a monopoly, which a lot of people believe they do, and the argument could definitely be made that, but they're not really going to dictate how I live my life. I can go somewhere else and shop if I want to. Whereas with government, they can tell me where I live and how much money I give to them. They have a lot more control over me than corporations do.
sure. And I agree with you there. Yes, governments definitely have way more control over what you can and cannot do in this country. I 100% agree with you, Rick. So I'm finding that there are things that we relatively see eye to eye on and things that we don't, which is what I believe about people, is that we get into people on the individual level. These conversations are more intelligible than they are when you are speaking broadly and generally to groups of people. You know what I'm saying? So I actually agree with you. When I look at like things like government surveillance or surveillance technology, right? Some of that stuff originates in the private sector, right? And government might take it over, or it might remain in the private sector hands, and the private sector can do whatever they want with it, right? My concern on the corporate level is that I don't believe that corporations are making decisions for themselves by themselves. I believe that corporations and the ruling class, those rich people who own those corporations, are all meeting in a room and it's strategically saying this is where we should take the economy, or this is where the politics should go, or this is how we should erode people's free will.
You know where they're going, don't you? You know where those fat cats are going. They're going to the government. They're going to the government and saying, "Hey, here's some money. Help me out with my taxes on this and institute this policy so that I
That's
can."
right.
So to me, if you make that government less and give the government less power, you lessen the power of those corporate entities also.
Well, but won't and so and I love this conversation, right? Because you're individually one of the most ideologically opposed to me, and I don't want to say that rudely. I still respect you and even love you in some ways as a person. And I agree with you that if government's role was reduced and corporations still had the power they had, right? Then the regulations those corporations would have won't be as, I mean, the regulations against that corporation won't be as prevalent, or even as there might not be as much regulations, right? But my question is the reason why government creates those rules and everything for corporations is because corporations have tended to harm people. And so government has kind of tried to create that equalization for corporations to not be so harmful to people, whether it's their
You
consumers
don't
or their workers.
you don't think that a lot that the bigger reason for regulations, quote unquote regulations, is for votes?
I mean, relatively, yeah. I mean, but and that's why I'm saying is like I don't like to draw a broad brush picture about government or corporations or individuals. I like to say, hey, like this is happening, also this is happening, also this is happening, also this is happening, and if you look at it together, this is what's happening. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so yes, I agree with you. Government has a role to play and has failed people time and time again. I also believe corporations have a role to play and they've failed people time and time again as well. So those two things are actually almost equal to me.
I would urge you to, have you ever delved into Thomas Sowell or Milton Friedman?
I know Milton Friedman. That name is very familiar, Friedman, but I
I
also
would,
read a
he
lot of.
has a very libertarian view of corporate regulation. I would urge you to research him and see what he says about it. He can say it a lot more eloquently than I can, but he believes that, and he makes a lot more sense about it, that less regulation is actually a lot better in the long run for people, and that they would have to self-regulate, and government really isn't necessary to regulate most corporate activities, that it can actually be done in the private sector and will be done through capitalism. but it's really not. Government is not as necessary as needed to do regulations.
Those are some resources I will definitely look into. Let's move on to the next question, Rick.
Okay.
And I appreciate the conversation thus far. The next question is, what do you believe about the people who voted opposite of you? Free reign. You can call me stupid if you want. I did vote for Kamala.
I was a Democrat until I was about 21. And then I graduated high school in 87. And then first time I voted at 18, I voted Democrat. And then I got on why is his name slipping my mind now? 92. Who was the independent candidate in 92?
I wish I knew.